Howdy y'all, welcome back. Thank you for being here. Today, we have a truly incredible video. For those of you that are looking for strictly old world photographs of incredible architecture, of lost architecture, of cities that are no longer standing or no longer look the way that they once did, then this video is for you. We're going to be looking at the oldest photographs of San Francisco. And while I was going to dive into the narrative behind San Francisco, even before I did that, I was looking at the history of the photographer behind these images because every photograph today will come from one man. He was known as Eadweard Muybridge. And as soon as I began to read his narrative, it was full of all of these different anomalies and things that stood out as so bizarre. So I thought today we would dive into that history. I have covered a bit of Eadweard Muybridge's work before in some of my other videos, but never before have I taken the deep dive into his history, and it's honestly so revealing of what was going on in high society and in California in the 19th century. By all accounts, Eadweard Muybridge is considered one of, if not the greatest photographer of the 19th century, and yet within his history, there are so many details that we can pinpoint that it doesn't seem that one man should be able to do all of these things that Eadweard Muybridge was given credit for. So if you want to watch a video with some of the most incredible photographs of old world California, of San Francisco before the year 1900, of different locations that were photographed for the first time in history, and if you want to hear about some of the anomalies of the photographer, some of this history that simply does not make sense, then this video is for you. A topic of extreme importance in the context of old world debate is San Francisco. We are told quite literally, San Francisco arose from next to nothing to a city of extreme magnificence and lavish architecture following the California Gold Rush. Yet the early photographic evidence of San Francisco's true history is a difficult find, and nearly all of the immaculate images of early San Francisco come to us by the way of Eadweard Muybridge, a British photographer with a rather eccentric and sometimes downright unbelievable history. Yet, just as soon as San Francisco had risen to the Mecca of the West Coast, it was nearly completely destroyed in the earthquake of 1906, which leveled just about every inch of the majestic and mysterious city, reducing even the most grand of architecture to rubble. As you may be familiar with, this was not the end for San Francisco, but rather, this was used as a new beginning to facilitate the rebuilding and restructuring of the entire metropolitan area, which culminated in the 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition held in San Francisco, a World's Fair which, again, saw a historically significant American city being replaced with temporary structures, many of which were later made permanent. If these images or that history sounds interesting to you, then stay tuned, as we will be diving into some of the most incredible photographs of San Francisco ever taken. But honestly, I think the first box to check in our discussion would be to identify this photographer and to give you a better understanding of his alleged backstory, because it's quite a doozy. Eadweard Muybridge was born as Edward James Muggeridge in the year 1830 in Greater London, England. According to historical records, Muggeridge first changed his name to Mugridge before age 25. Then from 1855 through 1865, he went by Muybridge. In 1865, he then finally began going by the surname Muybridge, claiming it was archaically the same last name as his original. For these reasons, keeping track of Eadweard Muybridge's early life has become incredibly difficult according to researchers. To me, this may be seen as plausible deniability weaved into the narrative of a man who is given credit with far more than it seems any one person could be capable of. Born in April of 1830, Eadweard Muybridge was son to John Muggeridge, a grain and coal merchant. As was commonplace for merchants at this time, the Muggeridge family was said to have lived atop their massive red brick warehouse. Muggeridge's cousins were prominent figures in Australian history, including Norman Self, a leading engineer, architect, and city planner, and Maybank Self, pioneer of the women's suffrage movement in Australia. The Muggeridge family are described in the narrative as the leading agricultural merchants of London. However, Eadweard Muybridge's family also included the Sheriff of London, Henry Muggeridge. To say that this family was well connected would be an understatement. The trajectory of Eadweard Muybridge's career is no less questionable. In 1850, at the age of 20, Muybridge left London for New York City to become a bookseller. He did not arrive to New York until 1852. There, he opened a business known as Muybridge and Bartlett, where he imported medical books to be sold to colleges in America. This business eventually failed. In 1855, Muybridge arrived to New Orleans from New York, and mind you, he had still never taken a photograph by this time, yet he would go on to be considered one of the greatest photographers of all time. Registered as a book agent in New Orleans, Muybridge then traveled to the fledgling state of California in October of 1855, selling imported, illustrated Shakespeare novels. By 1856, seeing California as the business capital of the quote Wild West, Muybridge purchased a home in San Francisco. He was still a registered book agent of London, yet he opened his own publishing business in 1858. That same year, Muybridge was selected a leading member of the Mechanics Institute of the city of San Francisco, and by 1859, he was the director of the San Francisco Mercantile Library. My question becomes, with all of these achievements, what was going on behind the scenes to facilitate this? I highly doubt importing a few books from London would gain you access to these high-ranking positions. But maybe I'm wrong. Those merchants do get lucky. In May of 1860, Muybridge sold his entire business, books, buildings, and namesakes, to travel the world. Mind you, he still had not taken a photograph at this point. The timeline doesn't really add up. In June of 1860, he left California for New York, from which he would then head to England before traveling to other famous cities throughout Europe. Yet in early July 1860, 1 month later, Muybridge was involved in a serious stagecoach accident along the Mexican border in Texas, which saw all the passengers ejected from the cabin. 2 of these passengers perished, and Muybridge was in a coma for the next 9 days. When he awoke, he was in Fort Smith, Arkansas, a fortified town that was being heavily utilized in the forced migration of indigenous people. Is this all just a coincidence? We're told in the narrative, before the accident, Muybridge was a clean-shaven businessman, yet the 9 days in a coma were said to have turned his entire head of hair gray, and following his awakening, Muybridge rarely, if ever, wore suits or shaved. Again, that makes for an interesting tidbit in the narrative, but the deep dive history is also very strange. Muybridge left Fort Smith, made his way to New York City, just as he had planned. Then he sued the stagecoach company for $2,500, equivalent to roughly $98,000 today. He then traveled with this money to London and met with Queen Victoria and her doctor, Sir William Gull. According to Muybridge's own recounting of his life, he claims that Sir Gull told Muybridge that he could no longer consume caffeine or alcohol or gamble or even eat meat, and that Muybridge should retire from being a book merchant. Devastated, Muybridge was said to have turned to the fledgling technology of photography to help him get his life back on track. At least, That is how the narrative is written. Yet by 1861, Muybridge was receiving patents in London for machines which he is believed to have discovered in smaller communities throughout his merchant travels. For example, one washing machine was patented by Muybridge in 1861 in London, and the same machine was proven to have been patented elsewhere in Europe, including in France. However, Muybridge, being friend of the Queen and seemingly an industry plant, so to speak, had his inventions and machines showcased at the 1862 World's Fair in London, for which Muybridge gained a small fortune. Again, this man just suffered a severe injury and was recommended to stop merchant activities entirely. Never mind the fact, by 1862, Muybridge had still not become a photographer. It doesn't really make sense. After the World's Fair in London in 1862, Muybridge does not appear again in any public records until roughly 1865, when he was seen in Paris, France. That same year, 1865, later on, Muybridge also appears in the records as the director of multiple large-scale corporations, including the Austin Consolidated Silver Mines, the Ottoman Company, and the Bank of Turkey. These ventures and his appearance in 1865 was seen as the first time that he began to use the last name Muybridge. Did Muybridge visit Tartary, and/or was he working as a merchant agent of some sort of more powerful, possibly nefarious organization? In 1866, just a year after being named the director of these major corporations, Muybridge was said to have been a key piece in the Panic of 1866, where each one of these companies was dissolved and the profits were distributed to the directors. This netted Muybridge a fortune comparable to the greatest merchants in the world at this time. What's furthermore, it's completely unclear when Muybridge began taking photographs, as when he returned to America in 1867, he returned with photographic equipment and immediately started a photographic business. He landed back in San Francisco in February of 1867, and he was described as unrecognizable. Having just taken the name Muybridge in 1865, in America, he also adopted the alter ego known as Helios, whom he called the god of light. So essentially, he believed himself to be a god, and this, the greatest photographer of the 1860s and 1870s, was seemingly born from this traumatic injury. Or possibly, it's more complicated than that. Muybridge's converted carriage became known as the Helios Flying Studio, where he would produce photographs from anywhere in the country. Again, I take everything in the current narrative with a huge grain of salt, but Muybridge claimed to have fixed the vanilla skies of old images, which he claimed was caused by the tendency of intense blue skylight to bleach out the skies of images due to the blue-sensitive nature of the photographic emulsion liquids. His career trajectory in America also bears a second look. From February of 1867 through June of 1867, Muybridge photographed as much of San Francisco as possible in stereoscope or old world 3D to be sold off as souvenirs. From June of 1867 through November of 1867, Muybridge spent the entire summer and parts of fall in Yosemite Valley, taking the first quality photographs of Yosemite and its surroundings. To haul around the hundreds of pounds of his equipment through the wilderness is nothing short of miraculous. In 1868, Muybridge, mind you, having just taken up photography 1 year earlier, was hired by the United States government to be the official photographer of Alaska, the newly acquired territory. Following success in Alaska, Muybridge was then hired by the United States Lighthouse Board in 1871 to document all the major lighthouses of America, beginning on the West Coast. During the years of 1870 through 1872, Muybridge took construction photographs of the San Francisco Mint, creating what some see as the first time-lapse collection of photographs. In 1873, Muybridge was commissioned by the United States Army to document the Lava Beds War between the Modoc people of California and Oregon. Having seen the success of earlier staged photographs of the Crimean War, Muybridge was said to have staged nearly every photograph he took of the Lava Beds War, sometimes paying the subjects to remain as still as possible during the photographic process. What's remarkable is, just like with the Crimean War, this is supposed to be an active war zone. To imagine Muybridge having opposing sides, truly posing for numerous seconds, to capture these images is beyond my comprehension, unless this war, like so many others, is not exactly what we've been told. Indeed, I believe we must dive deeper. Around 1873, former governor of California, Leland Stanford, hired Muybridge to document his estate and possessions, including his prized racehorse, Occident. Stanford was deeply frustrated that the public had a skewed view of how horses gallop, based off artistic depictions which became common belief that horses always had at least one hoof on the ground, even at full gallop. Stanford paid copious amounts of money to Muybridge to capture an image proving that this was not true. After several failed attempts, Muybridge captured an extremely blurry photograph of Occident at full gallop in 1873. No copy of this image has ever been discovered. Unimpressed with the blurry image, it is estimated that Stanford shelled out another $25,000 to Muybridge to capture a higher quality photograph of the horse in gallop. When adjusted for inflation, this was over $650,000 for a single photograph of a galloping horse. Muybridge was said to have used this money to finance a team-up with the engineers of the Central Pacific Railroad, the same railroad of which Stanford was a founder. By 1877, Muybridge captured a more detailed photograph of Occident in full stride, which then became a popular nationwide cabinet card. However, remarkable for being one of the most famous photographs of all time, no copies are known to have survived to today. In 1878, using mechanical shutters and electricity, Muybridge formulated a plan to capture 12 photographs in sequence using a battery and electrically triggered wires, which would capture the images when the wires were tripped by the passing horse. This was also a great success, and the horse in gallop, as it was known, became the most popular exhibit that was showcased in the Magic Lantern. The Magic Lantern was an early image projector that used paintings, prints, or later photographs and a series of lenses and a light source to project images. These magic lantern projectors actually predate photography and have been in use since the time of the original camera obscura. Honestly, it gets even stranger. Eadweard Muybridge is often given credit as also creating the first movie projector, with his invention known as the Zoopraxiscope or the Zoogyroscope. The device was invented to view Muybridge's photographs in motion, thus proving their authenticity. Muybridge gave public lectures using the Zoopraxiscope through the year 1895, when the invention appears to disappear from the mainstream narrative. The projector used discs that were very similar in size and shape to modern-day records. The discs were made of glass and originally measured about 16 inches before being shortened to 12 inches. There are 71 known Zoopraxiscope discs that have been discovered. The Zoopraxiscope machine was hand-cranked. By 1893, Muybridge was said to have created thousands of these discs to be sold at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. However, the discs are said to have sold extremely poorly, and they nearly ended Muybridge's career. The Zoopraxiscope is said to have been the direct influence for Thomas Edison's kinetoscope, the first commercial film system in the world. However, the true meat and potatoes of Muybridge's mystery can be seen in trying to understand his personal life and how all of this would have been possible. Muybridge, age 41, was married in the year 1871 to a divorcee named Flora Stone, who was 20 years younger than him. By April of 1874, Flora had given birth to their son, Florado Helios Muybridge. Yet it was well known among the elite circles of California that Flora was having an affair with a mutual friend known as Larkins. After receiving the massive sum of money from Stanford to continue his studies of horses and motion in photography, Muybridge had left his young wife alone for long periods of time. Flora's maternity nurse for their new son shared some troubling news with Muybridge that the affair was still occurring and that his son Florado was actually the son of Larkins. This was discussed in great length in love letters between Larkins and Flora. Muybridge, after learning of this, promptly took a train to Calistoga, where Larkins lived. He walked up to him on the street in broad day and exclaimed, "I have a message for you from my wife," before ending Larkins' life. Muybridge was immediately arrested without contest, and while in prison, Muybridge was said to have become close with nearly everyone at the jail, both inmates and officers. Flora immediately filed for divorce, but this was actually dismissed. At his trial in 1875, Muybridge was given the personal lawyer of former Governor Stanford, who then argued insanity based off of Muybridge's 1860 stagecoach accident. Muybridge undercut his own defense, claiming that the act was planned and premeditated, but he was still found not guilty, as the ending of Larkins' life was quite literally ruled by the jury to be justifiable. This history really is bonkers. Flora filed for divorce again in 1875, and this time she won, but she died suddenly just a few weeks later. Eadweard Muybridge was mysteriously in Central America when this happened. Now, if that wasn't enough esoteric history, appearing to mimic the issues of modern-day lavishness and high society, We're told the first kiss ever captured on camera was photographed by Eadweard Muybridge upon his return to America in the 1880s. That's all fine and dandy, but a kiss was considered to be pretty taboo to do in public at this time, let alone to be photographed. So the next aspect of this is even more radical. The first kiss ever photographed, captured by Muybridge in 1882, was of two women, both lacking any sort of clothing. How could something so controversial be captured in the 1880s? Well, it appears that this was actually pretty commonplace for elite society. It's just that these taboos were greatly hidden from the public eye, really until people like Muybridge, who blatantly attempted to push the envelope. Muybridge then caught the eye of Philadelphia publishers Pepper and Lippincott, who sponsored Muybridge in his capturing of over 100,000 photographs from 1883 through 1886, which, if those numbers are to be believed, equates to roughly 68 new photographs per day, every day, for 4 years. Knowing what we've been told about exposure times and the amount of time it took simply to set up the equipment, even into the 1880s, it becomes almost impossible to imagine capturing 68 new quality images every single day for 4 years straight. By 1894, having become the most prominent photographer of his time, Muybridge returned to England. He had colon cancer, and Muybridge's deteriorating health caused him to settle all his financial affairs by 1897, before he compiled his life's work into two major photographic books, known as Animals in Motion and The Human Figure in Motion, both of which are still in publication today, over 125 years later. At the time of his passing, Muybridge was said to be excavating a 2-scale model of the Great Lakes of America at his estate in England. The value of Muybridge's work skyrocketed following the earthquake of 1906 in San Francisco, as his photographs of San Francisco are some of the only glimpses into the city that once was. So there you have it, the history of this first photograph, the first panoramic photograph of San Francisco, accompanied by some other photographs of San Francisco and some information about the photographer Eadweard Muybridge. Do we believe what the current narrative has to offer when it comes to this history of San Francisco, especially when we look at this first panoramic photograph? We're told it was a town of a few hundred to maybe 1,000 people before the gold rush. And then in the 30 years following the gold rush, the town went from maybe 1,000 people to being a city of over 200,000 people. That, as you can see from the panoramic photograph, was completely built out. Every single inch of the city had some form of architecture, much of it being what we would equate with old world or fine pre-1900 architecture. This isn't just rudimentary architecture that's popping up in San Francisco. These are lavish buildings. This is a whole city that took its shape in less than 30 years' time, at least according to the current narrative. And while all of the buildings look to be related, they all look to be similar. They all look to be part of a much larger superstructure. We can see things like makeshift signs being posted on the building saying, this former factory is now a hospital, and this other former factory is now a grocery store. But the key to this is there are so many, hundreds, if not thousands, of these buildings that appear to be former factories or buildings that were once something other than what they are being labeled as in the panoramic photograph. This is honestly some of the most revealing and fascinating history that we have in all of America, and what's truly remarkable about it at its core is that even without the narrative, just looking at the photograph, there is still so much here that we could never begin to explain. Some of the questions that came into my head as I was looking through this panoramic photograph, and I would love to hear your questions, your thoughts, your ideas down below in the comment section. But one thing that always comes up in these photographs is, where are the people? And obviously, we have those diehards who like to stick to the current narrative, and they will tell us that it took about 20 minutes for each section of this panoramic photograph to be taken, meaning that we should not be able to see any people, any horses, really anything in any sort of motion would not be captured in this photograph. Now, that could be true. However, I have personally zoomed in on this panoramic photograph, looking at just about every inch and every detail. And one thing that I can tell you is that near the center of the city, in one of the middle panels, you will see that what appears to be the main road of San Francisco does have dozens of horses and carriages on it, with also people that are visible in the photograph, meaning that if one panel of the photograph was captured and it was able to showcase these people, albeit they are blurry, but we do see animals and people in the photograph, then every other section of the photograph should be able to depict people and animals. Even if they are in motion, there should be at least minimal blurs that appear in each section of this panoramic photograph where people and animals are. And yet, we do not see that in nearly any of the other panels of this photograph. In nearly every single panel, we can find one, maybe two horses and carriages, and no people in any of those photographs. So the question becomes, where are the people? And if the argument is being made that the photograph could not capture people, then how come there are people captured in the photograph? Only in the middle section. But still, it alludes to the fact that most of the city of San Francisco was empty or abandoned. If the people were there, we would see them. If there was evidence of horses and carriages and public transportation, as we're told should have been in the city at the time of the panoramic photograph, when we should have seen over 200,000 people throughout the city of San Francisco, but we do not see any. Where are the droppings from the horses? There's no evidence of that. There's not even tracks on the roads that show that any horses or carriages have traversed those areas. Furthermore, looking into that, where are the trees beyond the city? This photograph, the panoramic, is so detailed that if we zoom in past the city of San Francisco to the landscape that is past the occupied part of San Francisco, to what should be the wilderness, we can see that there is almost not a single tree outside of the city of San Francisco. There are trees within the city that appear to have been planted there within the last 20 to 30 years of this photograph. But beyond the city, almost everything is completely barren. Keep that in mind as we get deeper into this panoramic. And the final thing I want to point out is the clear rebranding of different buildings throughout the panoramic photograph. We have massive buildings, multiple different ones, honestly dozens of them, if not hundreds of them, that appear to be old world style factories that are being relabeled as other buildings like grocery stores and hospitals and things like that. It appears as if most of the city of San Francisco was created in unison at one time, and yet can we imagine that that was happening as the gold rush was happening? Can we imagine that thousands of people turned into tens of thousands of people, turned into hundreds of thousands of people in just 30 years, and in that time they constructed lavish, old world style architecture? These are not just rudimentary wooden buildings. Most of the buildings we see are red brick and stone, and they are absolutely immense. So can we truly imagine that a population that had almost no skilled labor, that had about 1,000 people before the gold rush, then flourished into what we see in these images? But in the meantime, let me know which section or which panel of this panoramic photograph stood out to you the most. There will be links down below so you can zoom in and see the details of this panoramic photograph yourself. The history of San Francisco clearly is not exactly what we've been presented with. I can't wait to hear your theories in the comment section, and we will talk again very soon on the next video.